Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So, as promised, I will be discussing to you briefly the poetic syntax of Jose Garcia-Villa's I Will Break God's Seamless Skull. So, let me start with a bit of a background. Austin posits that contemporary theories should both influence and be influenced by the analysis of literary text. In particular, our closest approximation to an adequate account of the syntax of simple everyday utterances should be employed in mutually beneficial study of the syntax of literature. This simple creed lies at the heart of the discipline widely referred today as stylistics. Poetic syntax includes the construction of syntactic rules and parameters contained in poetry, such as anaphoric pronouns, substituting for complex noun phrase constraint, conjunction deletion, copula inversion, doubly filled complementizer constraint, prepositional phrase fronting, pronoun dropping, and the like. All these elements can bring us closer to the understanding of the literary text meaning and effect. Cureton, in his study on the temporal theory of phonetic syntax, substantiates this assumption, noting that syntax, particularly the structure of the words, phrases, clauses, and sentences, is a primordial source of encounters in poetry. Tseng supported this assumption by focusing on the iconic quality in verbal patterning. There are two types of iconicity: the auditory phonaesthasia and visual concrete poetry. In his paper, the author argues that lexico-grammatical structure plays a role in associating form and effect or meaning. Tseng anchored this paper on Tufte, who coined that the term syntactic symbolism to explore how grammar might function to convey extra meaning and to give a symbolic force. Syntactic symbolism differs with literary symbol in that the former operates on the basis of grammar, whereas the latter can be realized through a variety of means, example, characters, objects, and so on and so forth. It is also important to stress that an icon is an image which physically resembles a referent, while a symbol does not. An example of an icon is an ID, because it physically resembles the owner, while a heart would be a symbol of love, because it does not resemble love in any way. According to Tufte, if there is something about the way the sentences themselves are shaped, it is the way grammar is organized, so that the very act of reading suggests some aspects of what the sentence names or describes, then the grammatical construction might be called syntactic symbol. To illustrate this point, Tseng quoted the original emphasis used by Tufte in grammar style. For example, number 1, he was sharing Mr. Ramsey's evening walk up and down to the terrace. So, written by Virginia Woolf, to the lighthouse. So the repetition here has an effect symbolic of walking movement. And as it ended, as they sat up in the gloom and prepared to enter ordinary life, suddenly the long-drawn strangeness of the morning snapped, holding up the verb, the telling of the action, till the very end, and prefacing the main clause with two parallel left branches, creates for the narrated act as an analogous grammar of suspension, which subordinates, holds off, then suddenly snaps into place. The water would rise inch by inch, covering the grass and shrubs, covering the trees and houses, covering the monuments and the mountain tops. Then each of the three participial phrases tends to be slightly longer than the previous one, is analogous to the graded rise of water level. I think the concept of syntactic symbol falls under the grammar of representation, where the literariness of text goes beyond the reference, therefore seen on what is represented in the text. Therefore seen on what is represented in the text. So the essential point about representation, according to Widdowson, is that it is the use of language to create its own conditions of relevance, whereas with reference, language is dependent on external and actual context. With representation, context is internal, potential, and dependent on language. It takes shape in the verbal patterns of the poem. A local study was conducted by Barrios, whose framework was based on grammar representation. Barrios further explicated Widdowson's concept of representation. According to Barrios, this Widdowson proved Romans